King Richard I of England, more famously remembered to history as Richard the Lionheart, remains one of the most celebrated warrior kings in English history, revered even to this day for his military prowess and conquest during the Third Crusade. Richard was born in 1157 to King Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine, and from a young age, Richard's life was defined by warfare, unparalleled ambition, and a relentless pursuit of glory. Unfortunately though, his life would come to an abrupt and tragic end in the year 1199. But his passing would not occur on the battlefield against Saracen warriors, or even by the hand of rival European kings, but by a nameless and unknown peasant boy who would shoot a crossbow bolt into the shoulder of the unarmored King Richard. In most cases, a bolt to the shoulder would not become a life-threatening injury, but due to unforeseen circumstances, which will be the primary focus of this video, Richard the Lionheart would have his final days filled with agonizing pain, an unbreakable fever, and the slow decay of his once powerful body. A horrifically cruel fate for a king who cherished battle and combat above all else, to find himself defeated not by a powerful warrior, but by a simple peasant boy who had probably never even wielded a sword. And on April 6, 1199, at just 41 years of age, the great warrior king would pass away, dying in the arms of his mother Eleanor of Aquitaine. But what was the exact illness or cause of death behind this powerful king's early demise? And how could a non-lethal wound kill such a powerful figure as Richard the Lionheart? To answer this question, we will delve into contemporary accounts and historical texts which make reference to the final days of Richard the Lionheart's life and provide a better understanding and overview of the circumstances surrounding King Richard's death. But before we begin, don't forget, if you want to find out more about the deaths of some of history's greatest figures, then subscribe to my channel, Historical Exit. In March of 1199, Richard the Lionheart would besiege the castle of Chalus-Chabrol, a stronghold under the control of Viscount Aymar V, a powerful nobleman who refused to submit to Richard's power and authority over France. And he was leading a rebellion against King Richard as well. And in order to minimize the growing strength of Aymar V, Richard decided to besiege Chalus-Chabrol, a stronghold which was loyal to the rebel Viscount. However, some historians have also hinted that Richard decided to attack this insignificant and poorly fortified castle not to defeat rebel forces, but to commandeer the Roman treasure which was rumored to be hidden within the town, as these additional funds would be enticing for the constantly bankrupt King Richard. Regardless though of what Richard's true ambitions may have been, March of 1199 would see the small and poorly defended castle of Chalus-Chabrol besieged by the forces of the king. However, the townsfolk showed their defiance and heart and resisted the forces of King Richard, and during the morning of March 26, Richard would head out near the castle unarmored to inspect the battlements, and during this routine inspection, a crossbowman from the castle walls would let loose a single bolt which would pierce into the unprotected left shoulder of the king. And upon initial analysis, the medical doctors affirmed that the wound did not appear to be fatal, and once the bolt was removed, that the shoulder should heal well and be largely functional once again. But this most certainly would not be the case, and Richard's shoulder wound would become infected and eventually turn gangrenous, a very unfortunate and deadly turn of events for the king. This viewpoint is first highlighted in the Annals of Roger de Hoveden, a contemporary historian who states that while the king was walking around the castle inspecting it, a defender from the ramparts loosed an arrow which struck the king in the left shoulder. The bolt was removed poorly, and soon the wound turned gangrenous. Roger of Howden confirms in this passage the largely accepted events that led to the shoulder injury of Richard the Lionheart, but also highlights that this initially minor wound became gangrenous due to the poor method in which the bolt was extracted from his shoulder. For those of you not aware, gangrene is a serious and potentially life-threatening condition that occurs when body tissue dies due to a lack of blood supply to the area, resulting in the gangrenous body part starting to swell and going almost pitch black, as can be seen in this picture here. And needless to say, unless prompt treatment is provided, which in the medieval period most likely would have meant amputation or surgery, then the disease can quickly become fatal, and this is evidently what would happen in the case of Richard the Lionheart. When the bolt was removed from his body, it must have severed some of the blood vessels and nerves in the shoulder, and since it initially seemed like a minor wound, no one may have noticed the early signs of gangrene in the king's shoulder till it was far too late. And this wound would cause the king immense pain and agony, and his body was quickly losing much of its strength, becoming a shell of the powerful figure he was just a few days earlier. English historian Ralph of Coggeshall strengthens this viewpoint by stating in his chronicles that, as the wound festered and corrupted, he saw his fate was sealed. The great king, once mighty and strong, lay reduced by sickness and weakness. This passage confirms that the speed at which the gangrene was weakening the king's body made it evident to all that Richard's final breaths were fast approaching, and it appears the king took steps to ensure his soul was cleansed before he would pass away, as William of Newburgh chronicles in his works History of English Affairs that, seeing death approach, he made peace with his enemies, forgave the archer who had struck him, and received the holy sacraments. And on the 6th of April, 1199, Richard the Lionheart would pass away in the arms of his mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, after fighting bravely but in vain against the gangrene which would arise from the poor treatment of a minor wound in his shoulder. As he passed, common folklore states that his final words to his mother were, "I die for nothing," perhaps implying that although Richard had spent most of his life at battle and war, ultimately all his great endeavours such as the Third Crusade and stopping the rebellion of Aymar V all went unfulfilled. At this point though, many of you may be wondering what became of the crossbowman who had shot and ultimately killed the King of England. And to answer this question, we will need to refer to the previous passage by William of Newburgh, where he states that Richard forgave the soldier who had shot him, and it would appear many contemporary sources believe that Richard's final wishes were honoured, and the peasant boy, sometimes referred to as Pierre Basil, John Sabroz, or Bertrand de Gourdon, was allowed to return back to his village with 100 extra shillings in his pocket. However, a second, more sinister theory is also mentioned in contemporary sources, which highlight that Marsadier, the mercenary captain of Richard's forces, had the crossbowman flayed alive and hanged to death immediately following the passing of Richard the Lionheart. So although the final fate of Richard's killer remains ambiguous, it is without controversy or ambiguity that we can confirm that Richard the Lionheart, one of England's greatest warrior kings, passed away on April 6, 1199 due to a lucky shot by a crossbowman and the poor medical treatment of the wound, resulting in gangrene and weeks of pain and misery for the king. So let me know in the comments down below if you think gangrene is the most likely killer of King Richard, and if there are any other theories I may have missed out on. And if you would like to read into any of the historical texts used in this video in more depth, I will leave a link to them in the description below and the pinned comment. And as always, if you want to find out more about the deaths of some of history's greatest figures, then subscribe to my channel Historical Exit. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.